The sun was setting over the city, casting a golden glow over the high-rise buildings and busy streets. A fancy charity gala was in full swing at one of the most luxurious hotels in town. The rich and powerful mingled, sipping champagne, laughing, and pretending to care about the cause while secretly keeping an eye on who was wearing what and who was talking to whom. Among the crowd was a well-known businessman, tall, sharply dressed, with an air of arrogance that followed him like a shadow. He was used to getting his way, used to people bending to his will. His money and influence had always shielded him from consequences. Tonight, however, would be different. Near the buffet table stood a woman in a simple but elegant dress. She wasn't dripping in diamonds like some of the other guests, but there was something about her, a quiet confidence, an unshakable calm. She worked for a non-profit organization, one that helped underprivileged kids get access to education. She wasn't here to impress the elite, she was here to secure funding for her cause. As she reached for a glass of water, the businessman swaggered over, his eyes scanning her from head to toe with a smirk. "You're not one of the usual faces at these events," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Who let you in?" The woman didn't flinch. She met his gaze evenly. "The same people who let you in, I suppose." A few nearby guests stifled laughs, but the businessman's face darkened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "Cute," he sneered. "But let's be real, you're here to beg for money, aren't you? People like you always are." The room seemed to grow quieter as more people turned to watch. The woman took a slow sip of her water before responding. "Actually, I'm here to remind people like you that money isn't everything. Respect costs nothing, but it seems you're bankrupt in that department." A gasp rippled through the crowd. No one talked to him like that. His face turned red, his jaw tightening. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he hissed. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Oh, I think I do." Before he could fire back, the host of the event stepped in, diffusing the tension with a forced laugh. But the damage was done. The businessman stormed off, muttering under his breath, while the woman simply returned to her conversation as if nothing had happened. The guests whispered among themselves. Who was she? How did she have the nerve to stand up to him like that? And most importantly, what would happen next? Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The murmurs in the room didn't die down easily. The businessman, still fuming, disappeared into the crowd, but his ego had taken a hit, and he wasn't the kind of man who let things go. Meanwhile, the woman, calm and unbothered, continued chatting with a few donors who had been impressed by her nerve. One of them, an older gentleman with sharp eyes and a warm smile, leaned in. "That was something," he said quietly. "Not many people stand up to him like that." She shrugged. "Someone had to." The older man chuckled. "You've got guts. What's your name?" She hesitated for just a second before answering. "Does it matter?" He raised an eyebrow. "It might. Especially if you're serious about getting funding for your cause." Before she could respond, a server approached, handing her a small envelope. Confused, she opened it. Inside was a single note, written in sharp, slanted handwriting. "You want to play games? Let's see how long you last." No signature. But she didn't need one to know who it was from. Across the room, the businessman watched her reaction, a smug smirk on his face. He expected fear, maybe even an apology. Instead, she crumpled the note and dropped it into a nearby trash can without a second glance. The older gentleman noticed. "Trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle," she replied. But trouble was already brewing. Later that night, as the event wound down, she stepped outside to call a cab. The city lights glittered, but the air had turned chilly. Just as she pulled out her phone, a sleek black car rolled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing the businessman, his expression unreadable. "Get in," he said. "We need to talk." She didn't move. "I'd rather walk." His smirk returned. "Suit yourself. But just so you know, I own half the businesses in this city. Including the one that funds your little charity." Her fingers tightened around her phone. He was bluffing. He had to be. But what if he wasn't? She met his gaze. "And?" His smirk faded. "And you just made an enemy. I could ruin you with one phone call." A cold silence stretched between them. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real, amused one. "You really think threatening me is going to work?" she asked. "You don't even know who I am." His confidence wavered for the first time. "Who are you?" She stepped closer, just enough to make him lean back slightly. "Someone you should have been nicer to." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him staring after her, his mind racing. Who was she? And more importantly, what was she capable of? The next morning, the businessman stormed into his office, still simmering from the night before. He slammed the door hard enough to make his assistant flinch. "Find out everything about that woman," he snapped. "Where she works, who she knows, everything." The assistant nodded quickly and hurried out. Meanwhile, across town, the woman walked into a small, modest office building where her nonprofit was based. The walls were covered in photos of smiling children, students whose lives had been changed by her organization. Her team greeted her warmly, but one of her colleagues pulled her aside. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep much." She sighed. "Had a run-in with that guy last night. The one who owns half the city." Her colleague's eyes widened. "Oh no. What happened?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A smooth, mocking voice filled her ear. "Still feeling brave?" It was him. She clenched her jaw but kept her voice steady. "Are you really this bored, or do you just enjoy wasting people's time?" He laughed, but there was an edge to it. "I did some digging. Your little charity survives on donations, right? What if those donations disappeared?" A chill ran down her spine, but she refused to let him hear fear. "Is that a threat?" "Call it a friendly warning," he said. "Apologize publicly for disrespecting me, and maybe I'll forget this ever happened." She almost laughed. "Or what? You'll bully a bunch of kids out of an education? Real classy." The line went silent for a beat. Then, his voice dropped lower, colder. "You're making a mistake." She hung up. Back in his office, the businessman slammed his phone down. No one humiliated him and got away with it. He grabbed his coat and headed out, his mind already spinning with ways to destroy her. But as he stepped into the elevator, his phone rang again. This time, it was his lawyer. "We have a problem," the lawyer said, his tone urgent. "Someone just leaked documents to the press, old emails about the offshore accounts. The ones we never wanted made public." The blood drained from his face. "What? How?" "I don't know, but they're hitting the news in an hour. We need damage control now." The businessman's hands shook. Those emails could ruin him. Who would? Then it hit him. Her. But how? She was just some nobody from a charity. There was no way she had that kind of power, right? The businessman's driver sped through downtown, running 2 red lights as his boss barked orders into his phone. "Call the media contacts, kill the story. Offer them exclusives, whatever it takes." His knuckles were white around his phone. "And find out who that woman really is." Meanwhile, the woman sat calmly in her office, sipping coffee as her computer screen displayed breaking news alerts. Leaked documents expose billionaires' secret offshore accounts. A small smile played on her lips. Across from her, her colleague stared in disbelief. "Did you have something to do with this?" She set down her mug. "Let's just say some people shouldn't throw stones in glass houses." By noon, the businessman's face was splashed across every news channel. Reporters shouted questions as he pushed through the crowd outside his corporate tower. No comment. These are baseless accusations. But the damage was done. Stock in his companies began to plummet. Board members demanded emergency meetings. His lawyer's phone rang non-stop with calls from furious investors. In the chaos, his assistant finally rushed in with a file. "Sir, I found something. That woman, she used to work for us. In the legal department. 5 years ago." His head snapped up. "What?" The assistant swallowed hard. "She quit after the Hamilton deal. The one that got investigated for." "I know which one it was," he roared, sending the assistant stumbling back. "The Hamilton deal. The one with the bribes, the cover-ups. The one she would have seen the paperwork for." His blood ran cold. She hadn't just insulted him at the gala, she'd been hunting him. That evening, the woman received a visitor at her modest apartment. The older gentleman from the gala stood at her door, holding 2 glasses and an expensive bottle of wine. "I believe congratulations are in order," he said, smiling. She let him in. "You knew this would happen." "Knew?" "No." "Hoped?" He poured the wine. "Let's say I've been waiting years for someone to take that arrogant fool down a peg." They clinked glasses just as her phone lit up with a blocked number. She answered on speaker. The businessman's voice was ragged. "Name your price. Whatever you want, just retract the leaks." The old man's eyebrows shot up. The woman swirled her wine. "Too late," she said. "The truth doesn't come with a refund." A string of curses erupted through the phone before the line went dead. The old man laughed. "My dear, you are magnificent." Downing his drink, he added, "But be careful. Men like him don't fall without swinging back." She gazed out the window at the city lights. "Let him try." The businessman sat alone in his darkened penthouse, the city lights blurring through his half-empty whiskey glass. His empire was crumbling by the hour, regulators had seized files, his board was convening without him, and #billionaire fraud was trending globally. His phone buzzed with a message from an untraceable number. "Feeling brave now?" The same words he'd thrown at her. His fist clenched around the phone, until another message followed. "Meet me at Pier 17. Midnight. Come alone if you want the rest of the documents." The pier was deserted when he arrived, the wooden planks creaking under his Italian loafers. Fog rolled in from the harbor, swallowing the sounds of distant ship horns. Then, from the shadows, "You look terrible." She stepped into the dim glow of a safety light, hands in her coat pockets. No fear. No smugness. Just calm, icy certainty. "Where are they?" he demanded. "The originals?" She tilted her head. "First, tell me something. When you bribed those officials during the Hamilton deal, when you falsified those safety reports that got workers killed, did you ever feel anything?" His lip curled. "This is about morals now? Please. Money is power. You of all people should understand that after today." A slow nod. "I do understand. That's why I did this." From her pocket, she pulled a thumb drive, and dropped it into the water between the pier's gaps. He lunged forward too late. "You bitch. Those were mine." "No," she corrected. "They belong to the public. Just like the copies I already sent to the FBI." His breath came in ragged bursts. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. And she saw it. "You'll regret this," he whispered. She turned to leave. "I regret that it took this long." 3 blocks away, in an unmarked van, 2 federal agents monitored the conversation via the wire they'd insisted she wear. "Got him admitting to the Hamilton bribes," one muttered, removing headphones. "That's enough for an arrest warrant." His partner frowned at the live news feed on their tablet, footage of protesters outside the businessman's headquarters, children holding signs that read, "Stop stealing our future." "Think she planned it this way from the start?" The first agent smirked. "Lady didn't just bring receipts. She brought a revolution." Dawn found the woman back at her office, watching the sunrise paint the city gold. Her phone buzzed, a notification. "Breaking, billionaire CEO arrested on fraud, bribery charges." A tear slipped down her cheek. Not of joy. Not even of relief. Just the quiet weight of justice, finally served. The businessman sat in a cold interrogation room, his tailored suit wrinkled, his gold watch confiscated. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the FBI agent slid a photo across the table, a snapshot of him handing an envelope to a city official during the Hamilton deal. "Care to explain this?" the agent asked. His lawyer started to object, but the businessman silenced him with a raised hand. "I want immunity," he demanded. "And protection." The agent leaned back, unimpressed. "From who? The woman you threatened? The workers your safety violations killed?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "You have no idea what she's capable of." Meanwhile, crowds had gathered outside the courthouse, chanting for accountability. News vans lined the streets, reporters shouting questions at anyone connected to the case. The woman watched from a quiet cafe across the square, her face half hidden by a scarf. The old gentleman from the gala slid into the seat opposite her, placing 2 steaming cups between them. "You're a hero," he said, nodding toward the protesters. She stirred her tea slowly. "No. Heroes don't set traps. Justice isn't always clean," he countered. "Those children your charity helps? They'll have a better world because of what you did." A young protester's sign caught her eye, "Teach us to fight like you did." Her fingers tightened around the cup. Back at headquarters, the businessman's empire was unraveling faster than anyone expected. His second-in-command was already negotiating with prosecutors, offering documents that implicated even more powerful people. Board members were resigning en masse, stocks were in freefall, and the DA had announced a special task force to investigate all his dealings. His lawyer slumped into the visiting room chair. "They're offering a deal. 20 years instead of life." The businessman's laugh was hollow. "For me to rot in some cell while she walks free?" He leaned forward, eyes burning. "Find her weakness. Everyone has one." That night, the woman returned to her apartment to find the door slightly ajar. Every hair on her neck stood up. She reached for her phone, just as a shadow moved inside. "Relax," came a familiar voice. The old gentleman stepped into view, holding a file. "I let myself in. We have a problem." He spread documents across her kitchen table, surveillance photos of children outside her charity center, financial records tracing mysterious donations, and a memo with a single underlined sentence. "Discredit the source, and the truth becomes debatable." Her blood ran cold. "He's coming after the kids." The old man nodded grimly. "They'll claim you used the charity as cover, that the leaks were extortion. His media allies are already planting the narrative." She stared at the faces in the photographs, her students, innocent and unknowing. The businessman couldn't touch her directly, so he'd attack what she loved most. For the first time since this began, real fear flickered across her face. Dawn found her sitting on a park bench outside the charity center, watching the first children arrive for their morning classes. One little girl, no older than 8, skipped up to her. "Miss. Are you okay?" She forced a smile. "Just thinking." The girl patted her hand with heartbreaking solemnity. Don't worry. Bad men always lose. My daddy said so. As the child ran inside, the woman's phone buzzed. An unknown number. One message. Everyone breaks. Even you. She deleted it, stood up straight, and walked toward the building. The battle wasn't over. But neither was she. The next morning, the woman arrived at her charity center to find a news van parked outside. A sharply dressed reporter was interviewing parents, her microphone thrust aggressively toward a confused mother holding a toddler's hand. Did you know the woman running this program is under investigation for extortion? That she used your children as pawns in a personal vendetta? The mother blinked. That's impossible. She got my son into school when no one else would help. The reporter talked over her, turning to the camera. Disturbing questions tonight about whether this so-called charity was really a front for. Enough. The woman stepped between them, her voice quiet but razor-sharp. The reporter's smirk faltered as she recognized her. Ah. The whistleblower herself. Care to comment on allegations you? You have 30 seconds to get off this property before I sue you for harassment of minors. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. The camera operator lowered his gear. The reporter recovered quickly. Is that a threat? Seems intimidation is your specialty. A click sounded behind them. The charity's security guard, a retired police sergeant, had uncuffed his baton. 25 seconds. They left. But the damage was done. By noon, 3 major donors had pulled funding. The school district sent an emergency review notice. And worst of all, parents kept their children home, whispering behind locked doors about whether they'd trusted the wrong person. Her colleague slammed a stack of printed emails onto her desk. Look what his PR team is circulating, fake screenshots of you, admitting this was all for money. How do we fight this? She scrolled through the fabricated evidence, her stomach tightening. The businessman might be in custody, but his machine kept running. And it was grinding her reputation, and everything she'd built, into dust. The old gentleman appeared in the doorway, holding an envelope. I might have a solution. But you won't like it. That evening, she stood before a packed press conference, not as an accuser, but as the accused. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted over each other. Did you leak documents to manipulate stock prices? How much did the short sellers pay you? She waited for silence. Then, without notes or dramatics, she said. 3 years ago, a factory collapsed in the Hamilton district. 12 workers died. The safety reports were falsified to save $1.2 million on reinforcements. She tapped her phone. A holographic display lit up behind her, crime scene photos, buried memos with the businessman's signature. These families never got justice. Until now. The room hushed. Today, I learned my charity, which feeds hungry children, is controversial. That asking powerful men to follow the law is extortion. Her voice never wavered. So here's my offer, investigate everything. Our books. My emails. But while you do that, she nodded to the old gentleman, who wheeled in a cart stacked with files. Look at these two. Every shell company, every bribed official, every child who lost a parent because profit mattered more than people. A reporter in front whispered, "Holy shit." In his jail cell, the businessman watched the live broadcast on a smuggled phone. His lawyer's panicked message blinked on screen. They just raided our media firm. The fake evidence trail leads back to us. They're adding witness tampering to your charges. For the first time, real fear clawed at his throat. She wasn't just defending herself, she'd turned his attack into a larger spotlight on his crimes. And the world was watching. Dawn found the woman back at the charity center, exhausted but upright. A timid knock sounded. The mother from yesterday stood there, her son peeking from behind her legs. "We came back," she said softly. "No matter what the news says, we know who you are." One by one, other families appeared behind her, holding makeshift signs, "We stand with her." As the children rushed inside, laughing, the woman pressed a hand to her mouth. This was what he'd never understood. Real power wasn't in wealth or fear. It was in trust. And that couldn't be bought. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the businessman stood for sentencing, his once impeccable suit hanging loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, weeks in jail had stripped away his polished veneer. The judge adjusted her glasses, her voice echoing through the silent room. "After reviewing the overwhelming evidence of fraud, bribery, and obstruction of justice, this court sentences you to 28 years in federal prison." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Reporters scrambled to tweet the news. The businessman's knees buckled slightly, but his glare never left her, the woman sitting calmly in the front row, hands folded in her lap. As guards led him away, he suddenly wrenched free and lunged toward her, spit flying from his lips. "This isn't over. You think you've won? I still have friends on the outside who—" The bailiff tackled him mid-sentence. The last the world saw of him was his wild, desperate eyes as they dragged him through the steel door. Outside the courthouse, a sea of supporters cheered as she emerged. Microphones pushed toward her face, cameras flashing like lightning. "What's next for your charity? Will you run for office after this?" She held up a hand for silence. "This was never about me. It was about workers who deserved safety. Children who deserve futures." She stepped closer to the cameras, her voice dropping. "And about proving that no one, is above the law." A chant started in the crowd, growing louder until it shook the courthouse steps. No one is above the law. 3 months later, on a bright autumn morning, the woman stood before a newly renovated school building, the first of 5 being funded by the seized assets from the businessman's empire. Dozens of children raced past her into classrooms with fresh textbooks and hot meals waiting. The old gentleman joined her, leaning on his cane. "You could have taken a single dollar as a reward, you know. Been set for life." She watched a little girl with braids carefully adjust her new backpack. "I am set for life." A familiar voice called out, the mother from the protests, now holding a baby and waving paperwork. "Miss. The city approved our after-school program." As she hurried over to help, the wind caught a newspaper left on a bench. The headline read, "New legislation passes, Whistleblower Protection Act inspired by local hero." And underneath, in smaller print, "Disgraced billionaire's assets now funding education nationwide." Somewhere in a maximum security prison, a man sat alone in a concrete cell, staring at a tiny window. Through it, he could just make out the edge of a billboard, a mural of her, smiling beside a group of children, with bold letters beneath. "Real power builds. Real justice grows." He hurled his plastic cup at the wall. It bounced off harmlessly and clattered to the floor. Epilogue. Years later, when historians wrote about this moment, they wouldn't focus on the scandal or the prison sentence. They'd write about how one woman's refusal to back down shut down 17 corrupt shell companies, funded 238 schools in underserved communities, inspired over 2,000 whistleblowers to come forward, and proved that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. But on a quiet afternoon, if you visited a certain charity center, you'd simply find a woman helping a child sound out words in a book. And if you asked her, she'd say she was just getting started.